Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. We're going to finish up these ranking updates videos with my wide receiver position. And this is probably going to be the biggest, longest video, so we're going to try and skim through it. A couple of points of order. First of all, you can find these rankings up on the website, www.theFFforge.com. Link down in the description directly to the wide receiver rankings. Those are updated much more regularly than these videos. I haven't not made updates over the past month or two since my original video, where you can see the rankings that I will have up on the screen, where we will be making all the adjustments from, once again, my original rankings a month or two ago. But they're updated. They're going to be more and more throughout the month of August. Check those out. A couple of things, if you are coming across this video and you haven't been paying attention to fantasy football throughout the offseason, you're just getting into the groove right now, I always find that it's helpful to get a refresher on how players performed the previous season, because usually my memory on at least a few of the players is totally wrong. And so looking at the fantasy points, average fantasy points per week, is something that I've always liked compared to like the total amount of fantasy points scored across the entire season. And I have a system called Equalized Value, my EV charts for each position. You can find a link down to those down in the description to the page, where you can then go to my Google Doc with those in them. So EV system compared to average fantasy points per week, can get very lopsided or influenced, especially with such a small sample size. Based on one or two huge weeks could make a guy look like he was much more reliable on a week in and week out basis, or the opposite, maybe one or two horrible weeks made a guy look like he was worse on a week in and week out basis. Whereas the EV system doesn't take into account those huge games as much, and so it's a point system where it ends up basically it just rewards consistency for guys. So I really like it. I think it's a very valuable tool. And with that tool, after last season, I also went through and I looked at the guys who I felt were the top, I believe for wide receivers, it would be the top 5 most overvalued, top 5 most undervalued with my EV system. And so I will have cards to each of those videos, that one of them's probably already popped up, that you could follow if you would like to look at those videos. With Labor Day weekend coming up, the draft strategy videos will be changing a little bit more to, first of all, to my mock draft Monday videos. I'll start to look at redraft league for those videos. And if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like me to go over the next month, if I have the time, if I'm able to, I would love to follow through on those. So just drop a suggestion down in the comments. With that said, let's get right into these wide receivers. And once again, I forgot to make myself big screen. So you've been able to see the old wide receivers list. Let's go down a little bit there. And we've added in some new people. This will be a longer list than the one that came out earlier this offseason because of how the tiers work. So there we go. That's the old rankings. Let's start off. In the first 3 tiers, I believe, are totally untouched. Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, yep, same. I will say right after CeeDee Lamb, my next big target, I think, is Chris Olave. And that brings us to tier 4, which is going to become smaller. I have not been able to move Amari Cooper out yet, but we will see both Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins jump Keenan Allen. And then we will also see a similar move up for both Christian Watson and Devonta Smith, jumping Terry McLaurin. Now, I said this tier got smaller, but did it? Yes, it did. What did I do? So I think I'm going to need one more tier in here. One moment. So I create a template so I can just look at it for where I put guys instead of looking at a list. But apparently I didn't make my tier break here. So I have Terry McLaurin in a new tier, followed by Jerry Jeudy moving up a spot. Then we have Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, I think, jumping up ahead of Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel and DeAndre Hopkins has fallen since those rankings. He was still with Arizona at that point of time of the rankings. And so, yes, I'm less optimistic about him apparently here than I was with Arizona. I don't know if that's good logic or bad logic, or maybe my opinions have just changed on some other guys. But that is how this tier works out. I do want to be clear, Calvin Ridley over Deebo Samuel, not an easy move, very much, if you want to argue the opposite, and not something that I'm going to argue against. Then we have Christian Kirk still right here in my rankings. We have moved up Mike Williams ahead of Christian Kirk, ahead of Marquise Brown, and we also have moved DJ Moore ahead of Marquise Brown. And then I have moved Brandon Cooks up into this tier, fatten that tier up a little bit. I'm very high on the prospects for Brandon Cooks. All right, so Chris Godwin now is going to be jumped by a couple of guys. With Drake London, I have moved to the top of this tier now, and Deontay Johnson has moved up several spots as well. And the same can be said for Brandon Ayuk, who is going to be going behind Chris Godwin, jumping up from back there. And before we get to Mike Evans, Allen Lazard has taken a tumble in my rankings. He will be at the back end of this tier once we get to that. Mike Evans is now behind Brandon Ayuk and Jordan Addison behind Mike Evans. Jordan Addison recently had a very, very high speed limit ticket. It doesn't appear he was intoxicated or anything while driving, at least, but it was insane. I won't be surprised if we see like some sort of one-game suspension for him coming from that. So we'll wait to see if anything happens there. I wouldn't mind moving him back a spot or two. But here is where we are going to get something that many of you will agree with, I assume, at least compared to previously, because I did not previously have Jackson Smith-Njigba in these rankings. However, he is going to come up behind Jordan Addison. I'm sorry, I'm just making sure the screen. So let's move myself down a little bit here. I'll put up all of the rankings at the end of this video so you can see them in order, all on one screen. But Jackson Smith-Njigba making a huge jump up from not making it on this list all the way to this point. So I've totally changed my tune on him, apparently. I don't know how that happened, but it just did when I was making these rankings. He's not necessarily a target of mine, but I guess I have him basically ranked at ADP now. I'm ranked 36th, and I believe that's roughly where his ADP has largely been, wide receiver 36. So after Jackson Smith-Njigba, we have Treylon Burks, who has fallen a few spots in the rankings, but it doesn't appear like it with how I just pulled him up. And Michael Pittman has also fallen drastically in the rankings, so let's get him back here. After Treylon Burks, we're going to have another couple of names who I'm late to the party on, I guess. But we have moved Jahan Dotson and George Pickens up into this tier. I see the upside there with moving a couple of these other guys a little bit back for Washington too. That has helped me to be able to say, okay, I'm thinking a little bit more gets allocated to a couple of the other guys on this offense. So even I believe Curtis Samuel has moved back in my ranking compared to where I had him. So with that, Jahan Dotson has made a jump up. After that, we will get Gabe Davis joining this tier's party behind George Pickens. And to finish that tier off, we have Michael Pittman, a guy who I'm just not going to get this season. I have a lot of concerns. And that's going to follow it up with, this really starts an area of the draft where I'm no longer excited about the upside and I'm more concerned about the downside with these guys. Right about at Michael Pittman. Like, he should probably be at the top of this next tier, but I'm sure there's a reason I haven't done that yet. So this next tier is a little bit of a smaller tier with Courtland Sutton starting it off and then Rashad Bateman following him up. Nico Collins, another guy who's going to be falling in the rankings. I'm sure nobody will argue with me against that. And then Michael Thomas right here, and we're going to finish this tier up with Allen Lazard. So Jacoby Myers going to fall a little bit, Nico Collins going to fall a little bit, and we're going to get some new names then in this next tier. Starting off with Elijah Moore. If you could just get over there, that would be great. So Elijah Moore starting off this tier, followed by Darnell Mooney, somebody who I think is easy to overlook, but I don't think a whole lot changes as far as target share, and I think it'll be a more efficient offense. Things should open up for him a little bit better, maybe a better amount of his targets that he'll catch. So I kind of like him. Then we get to Nico Collins. These are going to be guys who are kind of getting out of this group of guys, especially right here, these three, where I'm just really more concerned than anything. At Michael Thomas, I start to see the light again. And that's going to continue through Nico Collins to, looks like, Juju Smith-Schuster. Rondale Moore, I can see the upside for when you're getting him at this point in the draft. Then Jacoby Myers, there's an opportunity there. That brings us to Tyler Boyd. Now we're getting back to guys who I'm going to be concerned about the consistency for, but the upside on a game in and game out basis I do think is there. So Jacoby Myers, Tyler Boyd, Zay Jones, and then Curtis Samuel I actually think is not a ceiling guy, but is a high floor guy to finish off this tier. So those are my new wide receiver rankings. Once again, I'll get as many of these players up on the screen, hopefully able to read, or you could go and visit the website to see them, and many more. I have well over 100, maybe around 180 or so wide receivers projected. Actually, I don't think I have them all up on the website. I cut it off at a certain point, but well over 100 up on the website ranked. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. Hopefully we got through that relatively quickly. Please like, comment, subscribe. It is awesomely appreciated. And I don't think I said this at the beginning of the video. On Saturday, ADP risers and fallers over roughly the past month that I have tracked, and we'll look at those, maybe get some opinions on some of them and whether I agree with them or not, whether some guys are not becoming values anymore. But that's it. Peace out.